Hello everyone, my name is Lola Aspiotis and I hope you enjoyed listening and watching my autoethnography. I'd like to start with a summary of my personal background, specifically from secondary education to tertiary education, to provide some insight into my life experience that have now shaped the identity and values I hold today. I was born in Sydney, Australia. I spent my first few years living in the lower north shore of Sydney before moving to Double Bay in Sydney's eastern suburbs to begin my schooling journey. My mother is Australian and my father is Greek. However, my father has now lived in Australia for the past 30 years. I have a sister who is 2 years older than myself and a dog named Lily, who is a very important part of my life. Although my parents separated when I was only 2 years old, my small family are extremely close and supportive of one another. Some of my major interests include sport and travelling. My favourite country to travel to is Hawaii. I love the beaches, food and culture. I always feel so welcomed by people of the Hawaiian culture when visiting the country. I attended 2 secondary schools. My first was Kambala Girls' School in Rose Bay from year 7 to 10. Kambala is an Anglican private school with the vast majority of students coming from Anglo-Saxon upper-class families. I never really wanted to go to Kambala, but my mother and grandmother insisted as they had both attended the school. Kambala, in my eyes, is a monocultural school, meaning there is really no cultural diversity. Although Anglican is a religion of the school, it is almost non-denominational. Pastoral care classes were only compulsory for years 7 to year 10, and only listed on the timetable once over a 2-week period. Many students would use pastoral care as a time to catch up on assignments and homework, rather than engage in topics which really portrayed a lack of religious beliefs among the students. By the time year 10 came around, I was not really enjoying my school life at Kambala. Although I had a large group of friends and was excelling in sport, I felt like I was stuck in a world where the only value in life was wealth, and if you had a tennis court and swimming pool at your house. My friends always got what they asked for from their parents, and they rarely got into trouble. As my parents were both separated, my home life was different to my peers. My grandmother was paying for my education, and both my mother and father worked throughout the week. Thus I had to do many chores and look after myself very often. My friends, on the other hand, had housemaids, mansions, and mothers that would give them whatever they asked for. This is an example of dominant discourse, as I felt that within my school, majority of the students and my peers were shaping the norms and standards by portraying the importance of wealth and living environments in order for one to fit in. Sociologist Karl Marx introduced the idea that power and assets dictated your position in a social order, and it is clear in my given situation that many families and students that attended my school portrayed the importance of money, living standards, assets such as cars, technology and clothes, to be the dictator of their power over others within the school community. In year 8, there was a particular event that really had an effect on how I viewed individuals of Islamic background. That was the Link Cafe siege, which was a terrorist attack carried out by Iranian man Horin Monis, who killed 2 hostages, one being the mother of a girl my age who attended my neighbouring school. As this incident was so close to home, I spent many months being fearful to go to the city and catch public transport, as I was afraid an event like this was going to happen again. There were times I wouldn't get on the train or bus if I saw a male of Middle Eastern appearance hopping on. I'd never learned anything about the Islam religion or other major religions, as my school didn't teach on these topics, so this event had a great effect on my perspective of Islamic people, as well as the perspectives of the students attending my school at that time. Native Week was celebrated at my school throughout the years I attended. However, as a student, I was never taught about the Indigenous Australian history and culture in depth, so I always found it strange that we celebrated the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders' history, culture and achievements, but weren't taught exactly what these were. This is a real example of the null curriculum being expressed. It's evident that the school has chosen to teach some topics and not to teach about others. Whether this is due to little or no students having an Indigenous background, or the suburbs surrounding the school having little representation of Indigenous background, or another reason. Although aspects of the Indigenous culture were learned, and in-depth study was never explored in the years I attended, which is upsetting to say the least, and I believe continuous activities and lessons need to be integrated into the entire school program from now on. In Year 11, I made the choice to move to a school outside of the eastern suburbs. I just felt that I didn't belong to the eastern suburbs culture. And I also wanted a new perspective on the society around me, so I moved to Stella Maris College in the Northern Beaches suburb of Manly to complete my final 2 years of high school. I really enjoyed my time here, and for a small school there was a lot more cultural diversity compared to my previous school, especially with the international student program. Being a Catholic school, religion was a compulsory HSC subject, and as I did not have a religious upbringing, I was a bit nervous about the subject as a whole. I didn't know what to expect or what I was going to be learning about. However, I really enjoyed it, and it became one of my favourite subjects in the end. My school selected Islam and Judaism as the 2 elective components for religious studies. Learning in depth about the Islamic religion allowed me to reconstruct my current perspective and subsequently maintain a more positive attitude towards Islamic individuals. To my surprise, in Year 8, Aboriginal history, beliefs and culture was implemented into the syllabus, which allowed me to develop a more deeper understanding of Australia's Indigenous people and their history. This is an example of the enacted curriculum, as by implementing the topic area of Aboriginal Australians into the HSC religion syllabus, teachers have the responsibility to appropriately and successfully educate students about Indigenous history, culture and beliefs. However, there is still a deficit view being implemented in both secondary school experience that I had in regards to Aboriginal studies. In order for deficit views to be moved on from, all teachers need to know more than historical background and syllabus content. They need to be able to willingly and knowledgeably teach the necessary content in depth, and not just discuss topics on national ceremonial days like Story Day, Australia Day or NAIDOC Week. I started at Australian Catholic University in 2017 and completed my first bachelor's degree in physical activity and health science. ACU was a whole new world for me. I found the cultural diversity within the institution refreshing. It was really enjoyable to meet new people that hadn't grown up in the suburbs as myself or went to the same school. I was able to expand my knowledge on different cultures and ethnicities through conversations in class and around campus, and meet students who shared many of the same values as myself, including family, education, health, and sport. In 2019, I did my practical experience at the Royal Far West organisation in Manly. I worked within the Telecare Health Team, which is an online video conferencing base that allows children and adolescents living in rural and remote regions of Australia to consult with professionals at their school or home for developmental issues such as occupational therapy, speech pathology, and psychological therapy, as well as webinars and other capacity building training for teachers to help identify and respond to issues and how to develop supportive environments in the classroom. A large majority of the clients were Aboriginal, and this experience really opened my eyes up to the health and educational inequities experienced by Aboriginals that I did not learn about during my secondary school experiences. Upon completing primary, secondary and part of my tertiary education and drawing on specific personal experiences, I perceive these 3 contemporary schooling issues to be of particular concern. So the education gap, lack of funding, and monoculturalism. Some words by Indigenous woman Bannock Bryant.
And my cousins and my sisters and I, we were the only ones that were Aboriginal. We dealt with quite a bit of racism. People would say really nasty things. One of the worst things that happened to me was definitely a moment where a teacher told me that I can't do it because I'm an Aboriginal person, stereotypically known to be unemployed, drunk. Any stereotype that you associate with an Aboriginal person, that's what she told me. And she said that I can't do it, so I didn't think I would make it to year 11, year 12, let alone uni.
Indigenous Australians continued to be disadvantaged within educational institutions. Aboriginals gained the right to a Year 12 education over 40 years ago. However, Year 12 or equivalent attainment for Indigenous 20 to 24-year-olds was only 65.3% in 2016, in comparison to Year 12 attainment rate for non-Indigenous Australians at 89.1%. So why is this? Yes, there are the obvious factors such as low socioeconomic income and geographical location for many Indigenous Australians, but why can't we close this educational gap? Well, it is clear the Australian education system is deeply stratified as portrayed within recent OECD data. Young Australians in the top socioeconomic quartile are around 3 times more likely to attend a private school than those in the bottom quartile. 2 disadvantaged young people are more than 7 times more likely to attend a disadvantaged school than an advantaged one. And 3, Australian schools in high socioeconomic areas are much more likely to have better quality educational resources. But the hidden curriculum is a major contributor to the gap in education. A study conducted by Rahman in 2012 on the implications of the hidden curriculum conveyed the importance of Indigenous students needing to feel that they belong to their school as much as any other child, and to move forward that Aboriginal culture and language needs to be accepted in the classroom. The vast majority of Australian schools implement learning rules and guidelines that reflect the white dominant cultural practices, allowing for many non-Indigenous students to not flourish or succeed. It is clear that cultural and social capital can help explain the education inequities experienced by Indigenous Australians. Australian schools consistently implement white dominant norms and practices, which leads Indigenous students to feel less at home within the school environment. And many teachers bring their personal biography into the classroom, which ultimately shapes how they interpret students' behaviour and judge its significance. Funding has a significant impact on student performance. Less resources such as technology and curriculum materials and larger class size leads to educational inequities. The majority of funding for Australian schools, about 75%, comes from state and territory governments, and the majority of the Commonwealth money goes to private schools. An article written by The Conversation displayed specifically that Indigenous education shows a need for a needs-based funding. In order for this educational gap to close, funding needs to be implemented through a grounds-up approach instead of a top-down approach. This will allow for schools and teachers to start with the basics, including early intervention literacy and numeracy programs, teacher quality improvement, and personalised learning support. Monoculturalism refers to the expression of the culture of a single social or ethnic group. Many schools are monocultural institutions. Specifically in my own secondary school experience, I attended a monocultural school. It lacked cultural diversity among students and teachers. Students that are part of a monocultural social institution such as school are not able to prepare for social, political and economic realities that individuals experience in cultural, diverse and complex human encounters. It was not until I attended ACU that I was truly exposed to what cultural diversity is and was lucky enough to experience such interactions. Without a culturally diverse environment, students within monocultural schools are denied many opportunities to interact with culturally diverse groups. When schools are monocultural, a normalization of culture takes place, which is the process by which the features of one culture are taken for granted and privileged over other cultures. On the other hand, there are schools that have culturally diverse students but monocultural representation among teachers. I currently work part-time at independent boys' school in Sydney, the Scots College, and there is a rather diverse culture of students, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, Asian and European, to name a few. However, the vast majority of academic and sports staff are Caucasian. Many academic inequities can arise from such situations as cultural capital is expressed among teachers, and their personal biography and cultural biographies are having an effect on how they teach, what they teach, and their judgments about individual student behaviour. Everyone, thank you for listening to my autoethnography, and I hope you enjoyed it.